Welcome back, friends. The weekend tournament results are in, and it's the last set of data for the previous data slate before the new rules take effect. So sit back, relax, and let's get to it. Just a quick reminder before we get started, do the old YouTube pleasantries. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit the like button. It really helps push it out there for more people to see. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe to make sure you get all my latest videos. And if you're looking for any other way to help support the channel, I have created Patreon, patreon.com/warpfriends. Link is in the description below. Go on, take a look, and any help is greatly appreciated. All right, guys, let's get started. So as I mentioned, the new data slate dropped last week, so most of the tournaments still using the old rules while some adopted the new rules. So I'm including this data with the old data set. So next week moving forward, we'll start with the new rules. So last week we had just over 1,000 players, and for the data slate, we had just over 10,500. Games played was just over 5,000, and for the data slate, we're sitting at just under 53,000 games. And we had 12 tournaments last week, bringing the total up to 181. So the first chart we're going to look at this week is the win percentage by armies. Just a quick reminder, Games Workshop's acceptable win rate is 45 to 55%. Anything that falls within that range will be in green. Anything 5% above or below will be in yellow, and anything greater than that will be in red. So sitting at the top there, coming in number one last week was AdMech at 57%, Imperial Knights at 54%, then we had Custodians at 54 as well, Death Guard at 53, and Tyranids at 52, tied with Thousand Sons also at 52. Now at the bottom, we had Agents at 23, Grey Knights at 38, we had Sisters at 40, Chaos Space Marines at 41, and then we had a tie between Blood Angels and Genestealer Cults at 42%. So I added the arrows next to the names. I tried to clean them up a little bit so they're a little less busy and a little easier to read. The green obviously means that they went up first last week. Red means they went down, and the dash is they stayed the same. So AdMech actually surprisingly had the best win rate last week. They did get some positive changes in the data slate, but I didn't think they were going to be as good to be in the top spot. Now, they only had 10 players, so it was a very small sample size, but still pulled out a 57% win rate, which is the best they've seen in a long time. Death Guard had a little bit more of a reasonable week, down to 53%. After a couple weeks up near close to 60, they dropped back down a little bit. Could be due to some of the changes made and just some of the players adjusting and everything like that, but we'll have to see how they go moving forward. Black Templars enjoying some of the positive changes they got in the data slate. Potentially, it's hard to say exactly which tournaments these results are coming from, who use what rules, but they had a 51% win rate, which is the best they've had in a long time. So I'm going to assume some of that came from some of those positive changes they got in the data slate. And Grey Knights surprisingly struggled last week. I mean, they didn't really get much in the last balanced data slate, but I don't really think they got nerfed too much. But they're down at 38% for the week, which is quite low for them. And even Sisters down at 40% this week, so they had a bit of an off week. And even Chaos Space Marines surprisingly had a 41% win rate. They haven't been down at the bottom very often. They've been flirting with, the bottom of the charts, but usually 46 to 48%. But it was a rough week for them last week. I mean, for the last week results, it's kind of skewy. Most of the big tournaments don't adopt the new rules because they have their list locked in like a week or more in advance. But some of the small tournaments just embrace it and they're like, whatever, you change your list, the day of, submit new stuff, what have you. So these kind of are mixed results, but it's kind of interesting to see if this is going to be kind of how it might look going forward with, you have Thousand Sons up at 52. Death Guard dropped down a little bit, which is, good to see. You don't need them up that high. World Leaders at 50. Tau back up to 50%, which is good. They've been having a little bit of a rough go. And like I mentioned, Black Templars had a good week at 51. So if we can get some of those armies that were struggling a little bit back up a little bit, we'll be in a good spot. And even Dark Angels, who have been struggling quite a bit as well, they also had a decent week at 45%. I mean, it's not good, but it's better than they have been doing. And I think as the next couple weeks roll out with the full data set and all the new rules put in place and the new detachment and whatnot, we'll be seeing them climb up a little bit more. Okay, moving on, we have Army Representation. So this is the percentage of players playing each army. And if every army was played equally, we'd be about 3.6, 3.7%. So if they have more than that, that means there's more players playing that army, and less obviously means less. So at the top there, we had Death Guard, number one again at 8.8%. And then we had Aeldari number two at 6.7. And number three, Imperial Knights at 6.2. Necrons at 4 with 5.7. And Space Marines at 5.4. Down at the bottom, Imperial Agents at 0.3. Deathwatch at 0.7, AdMech at 1, and we have Black Templars and Genestealer Cults both at 1.2%. So like I said, Death Guard remain on top. They've been on top the last 3 or 4 weeks ever since their codex dropped, flirting with 9 to 10% every week, and rightly so. They've been kind of a little bit broken, but I think with some of the changes made, you might see them scale back a little bit. Thousand Sons had a big week for players, almost 4%. Now, the new codex did drop that weekend, so there was some players playing with some of the new rules that have been leaked and what was available, but won't really see the full extent of the player base until next week once the codex has been out for a week and everyone has a chance to fully make their lists and get out there. And then even Dark Angels players, they have been sitting around 3%, but it's nice to see them up in the green. And hopefully moving forward, they might get a little bit of a boost, bring them back up closer to the average. But I mean, they're in an okay spot right now. And then down at the bottom, you have, your usual suspects down there, the people who have been down there the whole time. Now, I do expect to see maybe a little more Black Templars. They're not a super popular faction, even when they are good, so I don't expect them to be up, 3 or 4%, but maybe around 2.5 would be nice to see. AdMech did get some positive changes as well, not as much as they were hoping, but, at least the robots actually function with the army now, which is, a little bit overdue. So we might see them bump up a little bit. They're probably hopefully sitting around at 2 to 2.5% at their peak. Space Wolf's getting a new codex soon, so we should also see them bumped up. So, I think the bottom of the chart might not be as red moving forward, but it's tough to say because it has kind of looked like this for the entire edition basically, where there's 5 or 6 at the top, 5 or 6 at the bottom. So if we can get a little bit more balance in there, it would be nice. But overall, this is what I expected to see, and this is kind of what we got. All right, moving on, we have the combined stats for the previous week. So this is Armies win rates, XOX1 percentage, and representation. So just a quick reminder, XOX1 percentage is the percentage of players who went 0 losses or 1 loss at a tournament. So it's not a perfect stat, but it's just a nice way to see how well a player did with that army. So the more players who only lost 1 or didn't lose any games, sort of the better the army did overall, the more got closer to the top tables and actually a chance of winning a tournament versus the armies who don't have a very high percentage. Most of those players are living mid-board or the bottom tables. So it's just a good way to see which armies are actually doing good compared to their win rate. So at the top there for the week, we had AdMech. Then number 2, we had Death Guard, then Custodes, Thousand Sons, and Aeldari. And down at the bottom, Agents, Sisters, Grey Knights, Blood Angels, and Chaos Space Marines. Like I mentioned, AdMech had a good week. They only had about 10 players, 1% of the meta, but they had a 30% XOX1. So 3 of those 10 players went 4-1 or 5-0 at a tournament. They didn't win any tournaments, but I think that's pretty good. It's a high percentage of players doing really well. Death Guard, not surprisingly, in number 2. Now, a lot of that is actually kind of carried by their high rep. If their rep was down around 5%, they would kind of be mixed in with those like Custodes, Thousand Sons, Aeldari. They wouldn't be ahead of them. They had an above average week, but they still had a pretty average week and a lot lower than what they've been doing. So if they can even live in this range moving forward, while it is above the average, it's a much healthier spot to be in. Thousand Sons, like I said, some players playing with the new codex. I think they did pick up a win, and it was with one of the new detachments. They had a reasonable win rate of 52, very good XOX1 at 25%, so a lot of players doing really well with them. And that's kind of been the trend they've been going through this whole data slate. They've had a decent win rate and a good XOX1. They've just never been able to take it home and win a tournament. And surprise, surprise, as soon as the codex releases and players are able to use the new attachments, they actually did get a win. Some other things to mention, Tau, they did get some positive changes in the data slate, and they had a good week, 50% win rate, right where you want to be, and then 19% XOX1, which is just barely above where you want to be. So for the week, they were almost perfectly average, which is exactly where you want to be, I think. And then down at the bottom, we can look at some of the struggling armies, the ones that really struggled last week. Sisters and Blood Angels. Despite Grey Knight's low win percentage of 38, they still had a 12.5% XOX1. While the average of an XOX1 is about 17, they're well below the average, but they're still twice as good as Sisters and, considerably better than Blood Angels. While they did struggle overall, they had more players have some success with them. Well, there was like 4 or 5 armies that failed to break 10% XOX1 this week, which is kind of surprising. And even Emperor's Children is mixed in there. They had a 51% with only a 6% XOX1 and a 5% of the meta. So they had tons of players. They had like 40-something players, I think. And they only had 6% of them do well at tournaments, which is kind of surprising to see because they have been doing really well. Now, there was some changes made to them, so that could be affecting it. And, we'll have to see what it looks like moving forward. But it was a bit of a down week performance-wise. Maybe not win rate-wise, but performance-wise for Emperor's Children. And for the last week of data, for this data slate, it is a little bit more skewed than it has been in previous weeks. But I think it's a bit of a, like I said, it's a bit of a weird week, tournament-wise and rules-wise, so it's tough to take too much from it, but I think there is some positive changes for the armies that needed it, and some adjustments to the armies that also needed it, like Death Guard. So if this can kind of balance out, I think we'll be in a better spot moving forward next data slate. Looking at the tournament wins for each army, last week, not surprisingly, as it has been for the last few weeks, Death Guard got 4 wins, Pearl Knights picked up 2, World Eaters picked up 1, Tyranids got 1, Thousand Sons got their first win. I am including this data in the old data slate because I think majority of them is using the old rules, so might be a little bit of cheating on if they got a win last data slate, but I'm including it for the Thousand Sons players. Space Marines got 1, Votann got 1, Emperor Shogun got 1, and Dark Angels got 1. All right, next up is the current Dataslate win percentage by armies. So like I mentioned, this is for the last 12 weeks. I am including this week into the previous Dataslate. So moving forward will be a reset, and we're starting all over. So again, the acceptable win rate is 45 to 55%. So for the Dataslate, Emperor Shogun comes in at number 1 at 54%. Then we had Imperial Knights at 53.6%. Demons at 51.5%, Death Guard at 51.4%, and then Aeldari at 50.9%. And down the bottom, we have Imperial Agents at 37%. Templars at 42, Dark Angel at 43, Tau at 43.7, and AdMech at 44. Overall, I think it was a pretty good data slate. We have a few armies down under 45%, and it kind of ended up there the last few weeks, kind of dropped some of them down, like Blood Angels and AdMech. They've been kind of flirting with 45 up and down all data slate. But I think some of the major offenders down there, like AdMech, Tau, Dark Angels, and Black Templars, all got positive changes in the last data slate, so we should hopefully see them bump up a little bit. If we can bump those 4 up into the green and maybe scale some of those top ones down a little bit, we should see a much healthier chart moving forward. Now, there is inevitably going to be some of those armies up in the green that drop down just due to some changes. Hopefully that'll get mitigated a little bit, and we'll see only 1 or 2 armies down below 45%. It was a pretty good data slate overall. I mean, there's really not too much to complain about it besides, like Templars, they've had a rough go of it, and even Dark Angels and Tau, but things have been moving forward positively for those armies, like I said, and they did get some changes, so it should be better for them moving forward. And agents are in a tough spot. They're never going to get the full attention they deserve from GW, so they're always going to be either way up high or way down low just due to the extremely low number of players. So this data slate, they had a rough go of it, and moving forward, we'll see, but I don't expect to see them up too high because I don't think too many changes were made for them. Up near the top, I think Emperor Shogun will come back down a little bit. They had some changes made, and they've been kind of evening out the last few weeks. They had a couple really good weeks to start, and it propped them back up. And they only had like 5 or 6 weeks, like half the data slate worth of data there. So their numbers are a little bit lower, which is going to kind of skew it a little bit more based on a couple good results. So I think they'll be a little bit lower, and then who knows who we're going to see at the top. Thousand Suns and Space Wolves both coming out soon, so you could see them up near the top because Thousand Suns does look like it's going to be a pretty good codex. So it's tough to say moving forward, but I'm hopeful that the bottom can move back up into the green, and we'll have a nice, healthy green chart for the next data slate. And next up is the Army representation for the current data slate. So again, the average is about 3.6, 3.7%. So number 1 for the data slate, Aeldari came in at 7%, and then Space Marines also at 7%. Number 2, Adeptus Custodians at 6.7, Demons at 5.8, and then Asher Militarum at 5.6. And then down at the bottom, we had Agents at 0.3, Templars at 1, Deathwatch at 1.3, AdMech at 1.4, and then we had Sisters and Drukhari both at 1.6. Data slate comes to a close. Aeldari and Space Marines kind of tied for the top spot. Space Marines, not surprising. Aeldari, also not surprising. They had a really good data slate through new codex. I mean, it was mostly just Devoted of You Need, which did get some nerfs, so we'll see moving forward how many players keep playing Aeldari. In the last 3 or 4 weeks hasn't been Aeldari at the top with the new codexes coming out, so I don't expect to see them there moving forward, but they had a good run this data slate. Custodes, popular army, and they've been up there the whole time, despite, just being perfectly average, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. It just has a nice, good low player base, and lots of people like to play them. I think Death Guard will continue for the next few weeks to be near the top, but depending on those changes, they might see them drop down a little bit. And then you have Emperor Shogun down there at 2.2. They'll definitely be higher than that. I don't think they'll be near the top of the charts, but you probably see them level out in the 3s there, right where they need to be. And I think we should see a lot more Thousand Suns players, Space Wolves, and maybe even Black Templars and AdMech, depending on how well those changes are received once the codexes comes out for those armies. And we should see hopefully a little bit smoother of a chart, but it never ends up working out that way. There's always 5 or 6 armies that are the most popular because they're the best, or just the most popular, like Space Marines are. I have hopes that it's going to look a little bit more balanced next data slate, but I don't have the highest hopes. I still expect it to look kind of like this moving forward. All right, next up is the combined stats for the data slate. So we have win rate, XOX1 percentage, and representation. Just a quick reminder again, XOX1 is percentage of players who went 5-0 or 4-1 at tournaments. So number 1 there, Imperial Knights. Then we had Death Guard, then Aeldari, Chaos Demons, and Necrons. And down at the bottom, we had Agents, Templars, Dark Angels, Tau, and Blood Angels. Looking at the charts overall, I mean, it's fairly balanced. There is a pretty decent discrepancy between the top, 12 and the bottom 12, but overall I think it is fairly balanced. I mean, armies get to different places different ways. So you have like Space Marines in the middle there. They have 46% win rate, but 15% XOX1, which is both below average, but they have a 7% representation. So that's bumping them way up. Then you have armies like Thousand Suns who have 48% win rate, which is just a little bit below average, 20% XOX1 above average, but only 1.7% rep. So if they had Space Marines representation, they would be up near the top. So it's just kind of a way to look at all the stats and just see where each army is sort of excelling and where they're kind of struggling. I mean, it's pretty obvious that Black Templars and Agents struggled more than the rest. Templars had it pretty rough, and Agents, again, there's 0.3% of the representation. There's so few Agents players that one or two good results or one or two really bad results is just going to tank or skyrocket those numbers depending on which way it goes. And this Dataslate, it went down, unfortunately. Black Templars, from all the people in the comments, it's been a rough go of it, and people have been pretty frustrated, but they did make some positive changes, and I think you're going to see a little bit better results from them and Dark Angels and Tau moving forward, the kind of the bottom three there. I think we'll see them bump up a little bit. I mean, there's going to be someone who has to eat those changes, and there's going to be some more people at the bottom. Not sure who it's going to be just yet. If you want to give me your predictions of who's going to be near the bottom of this Dataslate, let me know in the comments. Curious to see what you guys think. But I am hopeful that it's going to look a little bit better. I mean, no army ran away with anything, despite Death Guard's dominance the last few weeks. They never really took over. Now, if they had that codex the entire Dataslate, it might be a different story, but they didn't. So they ended up in second place, which is really good. They didn't dominate anything. No one's running away with anything. We have more people suffering than we did have people dominating. So I think if we can, those people who were suffering got some changes and bump them up, I think we might see a little bit of a better chart next Dataslate. So next up is the Army Tournament wins. This is broken down week over week. So each color represents a different week. So you can kind of see where each army got their tournament wins. And this is obviously for the last 12 weeks results. So at the number one spot there, we had Orcs at 21. Death Guard coming close to catching them at 19. Aeldari at 17. Demons at 15. Space Marines at 14. And then Knights and Tyranids at 12. So Death Guard almost caught Orcs. You can see the last 3 weeks there. They've got 10 tournament wins. Orcs haven't got one in a while. Ever since the nerfs to Mordaka, they've really kind of hit a wall there, and I think we might see them struggle next Dataslate, actually, based on the changes, but we'll have to see how the Orc players adjust moving forward. Thousand Suns did pick up their first week in the quote-unquote 12th week of the Dataslate. Like I said, I kind of included this week into the previous Dataslate because I think more tournaments were using the old rules, and it's kind of a mishmash a week. So they did get one. Now, overall, it wasn't too bad. Most of the armies got at least a couple tournament wins, but it's still this kind of mirrors the other charts where there's 5 or 6 at the top doing all the work and 5 or 6 at the bottom doing nothing. Hopefully this can change. I always say this, change moving forward, and we can see more people around the 8 to 10, but I don't have my hopes up. New codexes coming out, they're always going to be a little bit better due to power creep, unless you're world leaders. And they're probably going to be up near the top, so it's going to probably look more like this. We'll probably see some new people at the top. Orcs and Chaos Demons might not be up there, but you might see Base Wolves and Thousand Suns. It's probably going to look like this moving forward as well. So the first faction focus for the week is Deathwatch. So looking at their previous 8 weeks of results, you can see their army rep anywhere from 1 to 2% is kind of fluctuating right around that range, which is what you expect to see for sort of a single detachment army. Win rate anywhere from 40 to 55%, 58%. So they're definitely very up and down as well. Now, I think that depends on who's playing them and sort of what tournaments they're in specifically, week to week. Due to the low player count, 1 or 2 good results can kind of skew those numbers up. Looking at their army stats for the meta average, the win percentage is just above the average, which is good. Army rep is about 3 times below the average, but that's expected. XOX1 is about 18.4 versus 17, which is really good. And the tournament wins only 2 versus 6.7, which is below average, but they have a really low army rep, so they're probably going to win less tournaments as well. And looking at their sub-faction player numbers and win percentages there, they only have the 1 detachment, so it's all the Black Spear doing everything there, so nothing really to talk about there. And obviously, the tournament wins all came with the Black Spear as well. I think overall, Deathwatch had a pretty good data slate. Despite their 1 detachment and everything kind of going against them, they maintain good win rates, they maintain good results. They're just going to have a low player count just due to the nature of the army. They're never going to be a super popular army, but the players who do play them get good results with them. So I think they're in a good spot. Hopefully they can maintain this moving forward. All right, and next faction focus is Black Templars. So I thought it was a good time to take a look at them because I got all the changes in the Dataslate, and I think it's going to be a little bit different moving forward. So it's a good time to look back, and maybe halfway through, we'll, in 6-7 weeks, we can pop in and take another look and see how they're doing then. But right now, looking at the previous 8 weeks, anywhere from 0.8 to 1.2% representation, pretty much bang on 1%. Not surprising due to the way they've been performing. Look at their win percentage. They were up around 50% about 8 weeks ago, and then they've just dropped down to 40, 27. So they've been struggling. And then again, like I said, this week back up to 51. So it's the first good week in a long time, and I think some of those changes were part of that. If you look at their army stats for some average, the win percentage is 42 versus 48. So they definitely struggled there with a very low win percentage. Army rep obviously is very low at 1 versus 3.6. XOX1 is 9, so almost half the meta average, and they had 0 tournament wins. So overall, there's pretty much just struggles straight across the board. So there's nowhere for them to go but up. So I think that is a positive sign for the Black Templars players out there. And if there's any Black Templars players out there, let me know in the comments how you guys feel about the changes to the Dataslate, and if you are excited or if we're hoping for a little bit more, or let me know what your thoughts are. Looking at the sub-faction player numbers, Righteous Crusade, 91% of the players, kind of speaks volumes to what people are playing there. But then you look at the win percentages, and Righteous Crusade only has a 40% win rate. Now, Wrathful Procession has 60%, but they only had 1% of the players. There's only like 2 or 3 players using that detachment, so you can't really take too much from that. Looking at the ranks of 28, they're pretty much dead last in almost every category. The only reason they're not last is because Imperial Agents exist. So, like I said, I think there's nowhere for them to go but up. They did get some positive changes, and I am excited to see how they do moving forward. I think the changes should hopefully hold them over till the Codex comes out, but that'll be up to the Templars players to let me know if you guys are going to come back and play them until you get the new Codex, or if you're just going to keep waiting it out. And that is it, guys. Thank you for sticking with me for the last 12 weeks of this Dataslate, and next week we'll start it all over again with week 1 of the new one. I am excited for the changes. I think it's going to shake things up a little bit, especially some of those armies who are struggling. So I appreciate all your guys' support and all your guys' comments. And again, if you liked the video, don't forget to hit the like button. If you want to see more, make sure you subscribe to get all my latest videos. I post these every week. Good luck in the tournaments coming up this weekend, guys, and I will see you next week.